Okay, we are now live on the Miami Book Fair. Woo! Yay! We have been
Woohoo!
planning and getting ready for this for months now. So, this is the RockHill Publishing live event on Miami Book Fair. We are in the marketplace. We have a booth there, and we have RockHill Publishing, James Hill, who's going to take over now and introduce the staff, or actually introduce the editor in chief, Athena Paris, and then we'll be introducing the authors. So for the next hour, stay tuned. We are live on the Miami Book Fair. James Hill.
Thank you, Sandy. Sandy's my publicist from PR Perceptions, and we've been working with her for quite some time now. And thank you very much, Sandy, for all your help. So, hello and welcome to the RockHill Publishing Facebook Live Miami Book Fair event.
Yay!
And that is a mouthful. And this is a week-long event. We'll be on every night at 7 p.m. Eastern. And we'll, in a way of introduction, I just want to inform you of who RockHill Publishing is and how it came to be. I am James L. Hill, the founder, owner, publisher of RockHill. I am also a writer, author, putting stories on paper. That's what I do. I also do a lot of software engineering. In fact, I've done that for years and working in data processing, document processing, application development. And then a couple of years ago, 6, 7 years ago or so, I decided to return back to writing and to publishing. And so because I found out that new authors was having a hard time getting through, myself included, I decided to start up with RockHill Publishing, because new authors are no less talented. And let me say that again, they are no less talented than somebody who have been published for years. What separates them is that someone needs to take the time, the effort, and belief in what they write, that it should be seen by the world. And for various reasons, that's what I decided to do. So the RockHill mission is to find those unknown gems, polish them so that they shine brightly, and make them the next stars in your literary universe. Of course, I wrote all that stuff down because, you know, off the top of my head, it wouldn't sound like that. And so for the next hour, we'll be talking to some of those previously unpolished gems who are now diamonds shining on their own. And one of the people who helped me and who helped shine those diamonds is my editor-in-chief, Athena Paris. And I met Athena about 6, 7 years ago. She's also the other part of my brain that actually works, because I figured a lot of dates and a lot of things, and I have Athena here to tell me, no, that's not right. So she's a great editor-in-chief, and her job is multifaceted, as both of our jobs are. We are a small publishing company, so it's me, her, and some artists and some graphic artists and things like that that come in and out of the company that will make book covers and things like that. So, but mainly, RockHill Publishing is myself and my editor-in-chief, Athena Paris. And so I would like to turn it over to Athena for a few words. Athena, take it away.
Athena, you're muted.
Athena, we still can't hear you.
Can you hear?
Can you hear me now?
Now you echo it. Whoa, okay.
We can hear you through James. We can't hear you on your own.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can.
All right. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Technical difficulties. We are not technically savvy. We are publishers. As James said, I'm Athena, and we are RockHill Publishing, a small company. And of course, my duty is basically to be an in-betweener for the writer and the publisher. So my task is to look for the interesting, the promising, the diamond in the rough to present to the publisher. So the duties that an editor undertakes is to developmental copy editing and proofreading. And as per submission criteria, I read through the synopsis and the 4 chapters, and if it grabs me that I find it promising, I will request the entire manuscript, of course, to judge its potential, which is plot structure, character development, and all those things that make a good story. Then copy editing, of course, is the real hard work, because now you work on sentence construction, grammar, spelling, and improving everything that how the writer wants to convey his story. So now it's the language. So the writing style and how well put together the story is, if there are plot holes, and we need to then work together. So it's a back and forth between the writer and the editor to find the path and find the correct way to, because the reader's got expectations. So you need to meet those expectations, and there's a standard. So obviously you need to follow the standard, because you can't be too much of a maverick. Oh no, I'm writing a special book all on my own and nobody's ever seen a book like this. Nobody's going to want to see a book like that because it's too out there and too different. So you need to stick to certain standards. And then, of course, the last step is proofreading, which is now looking for all the little things that get away. And trust me, they get away. Commas, lowercase, uppercase, lines that didn't get indented, spacing, all kinds of little things that happen. And you've already been reading something so many times that sometimes you need extra outside eyes to look at these things, because you just need to fix things. So obviously the editor is a type of an educator for the first-time writer, because many first-time writers, they don't understand the process. So I sit there and I try to guide the writer into improving the flow, because the publisher works as a whole on the book and I work on the inside of the book. So then I give advice, I help them to cut on the word count. And I love what I do. I love helping the writers, because my task is to help them polish those diamonds in the rough into that brilliant diamond, that they will produce. And talking about diamonds, one of our young writers, which is a young lady, H.C. Kilgour, has produced such a gem. And now I give her over to Haley to introduce her novel. Thank you.
Thanks, Sophia. Stellar introduction. Okay, so I am H.C. Kilgour, and my very first novel was picked up by RockHill. I can't thank them enough for it, and it is called Nanagi. And so basically what this book is, it's an epic fantasy that is YA/new adult, depending on how you kind of want to read it. In a single word, it is best described as chaos, but I'm going to expand upon that a little bit. So this story is about a young woman from our world. Her name is Keegan, and she is just trapped into this world filled with magic and told to go save it. And, of course, along the way, she makes friends, she makes enemies, and the story really follows the people she affects the most. And so, everyone's just trying to deal with this little redhead who's just destroying their world as they know it, essentially. It was a lot of fun writing it. I think when RockHill first got it, it was this massive beast. And, thanks to all of their hard work, it's this beautiful thing I now get to hold in my hand. So, I'm super glad to be a part of this family. And, everyone here is amazing writers and amazing people. And, this really is just a second family to me. And I guess a little bit about myself. When I am not writing, I'm a marine biologist. I like the water, so I go play on the water. it's a lot of fun. I've had some wild experiences. They do often pop up in my writing. So if you know what you're looking for, you can see some of my real life wild adventures in my writing. And now I'm going to pass it over to our wonderful historical fiction, historical romance writer, Zach Vicaris.
Well, thanks very much for that, Haley. I'm Zach Vicaris, and I wrote the Vavelis Chronicles, which is the first of a number of books, The Crescent and the Cross. Like Haley, I'm also a trained marine biologist, although I specialize now more in stem cell biology. I've just grown up a little bit. I get out of the water, and now I'm more in the lab. But the book is based around the Byzantine Empire, the fall of the Byzantine Empire, and it's really a story of two brothers, Nicola and Antonis Vavelis, and they start off as friends and become both enemies ideologically and politically after they meet Katerina, who, as you know, sort of as it always is the case, a woman gets involved and the whole thing falls apart. But there isn't really that much romance. It's more about the choices that people make. And it's the choices you choose to be good or to be bad. You choose to be right or to be wrong. And right and wrong is very much a relative opinion, as we've seen so recently. Everything's a relative. So in that sense, you know, it's for me, what motivated me to do the story was that my family have ties back to that period. And so I wanted to tell really the history of my people, for want of a better word, of the Greek people. It's a very interesting period of history, but rather than tell it as history, which is a little bit dull and boring, I humanized it by creating characters who have, you know, desires and ambitions and have needs and wants like everyone else. You know, Nicola and Antonis, they create, along with Katerina and a couple of other characters, they create the history as we come to know it today. There is also a second book that's coming out, Roxana's Revenge, told from a more female perspective, and so it's more intricate and twisted and dark. It's generally what it's about, and it's a great piece of history. But the other thing then is really I want to hand it over to my sci-fi aficionado, a hardcore sci-fi aficionado, John Ford. And John has written a very interesting book along with his other tech talents. And I will pass you over to John.
Yes, thank you very much, Zach. My name is John Ford. I'm the author of this gem, hopefully will be a gem someday, denoted, Dominion. First, a little bit of perspective on my background. I come from a scientific background as well. I'm a meteorologist by education, which is why I don't do meteorology. No, actually. But software became a much more viable career pathway after college. I didn't really want to sit through grad school for the rest of my life. So like my esteemed publisher, James, you know, one of my day gigs is in the software computer science arena. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. Now a little bit about Dominion. Dominion is an interesting creative project. Now, first I want to discuss a little about science fiction. I'll try to make this brief. Science fiction comes in two primary pillars. We can subclass the genre of science fiction into hardcore science fiction, as Zach had prefaced, and also how humanity is affected by science, and specifically the creative process of science therein, sometimes denote called cyberpunk. I have another author coming right after me. He's an outstanding writer. You're going to be introduced to something that he did, which is in that subgenre as well. My book attempts to do both. It attempts to start out describing hardcore science, and it creates a scientific, a fictional science, and then from that it starts affecting the people, and then the story gets a little more romantic, a little more to the humanities, how it affected the characters and the character resolution along the thematic arc. So it kind of achieves both, and that was really kind of the goal when I set out to write it. And thankfully, it seems like we achieved that, thanks to the wonderful guidance of RockHill Publishing. And as Athena had introduced herself, she's a remarkable editor. So if you do pick up a copy, I strongly encourage you do read the introduction, because the introduction is going to give some critical exposure to the science, which isn't very readily known. It's rather esoteric, but it is extremely important. And it will give the story a sense of urgency and real plausibility. Because what we're going to do specifically is we're going to take solid state physics and concepts in physiology, biological physiology of the human mind. We're going to mash these two together in a very plausible way. And what emerges from that union is way more than the engineers ever set out to achieve. Originally, they wanted to try and dabble with wave dynamics with EEGs and trying to generate these things artificially. And they ended up with a lot more. And there's some fascinating subplots in there. It's a really, really entertaining read. It's the kind of entertainment where you're going to go, oh, I wonder if that's really possible. And that's really what we want to be after in this kind of a read. It's kind of a goosebumpy, wow, this is a really interesting possibility that maybe something like this could happen. Because humanity is sitting on the forefront of artificial intelligence, and it's something that's many multiple different ambits of technology are trying to get the simulacrum more and more like real human responses and so forth. And eventually, maybe we'll achieve artificial intelligence, maybe we won't. But if we do, how will we even know that we actually achieve that when that turns on? So anyway, there's a lot of stuff going on in these 300 pages. Again, if you do pick it up, please read the introduction. And with that, I think I've spoken enough, and it's my great pleasure to turn this over to a friend and very talented writer, Mark Everglade. He wrote a book called Hemispheres, and I can't wait to hear him describe it, because I read his book and it's wonderful. And with no further ado, I now hand this over to Mark. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Likewise, I love Dominion. So Hemispheres is about a book. It's about a planet where half of it is always dark and half of it is always light. It's a space opera cyberpunk novel in the spirit of Gibson, Doctorow, Stevenson, and Ian Banks and all the great writers who came before. On the dark side of this planet in the book, they use fireflies for both light and currency. When humans first colonized the planet, the technology they brought was largely sabotaged, including their sources of light. So light became used as a source of currency. A radical group in the book tries to rotate the planet faster, to bring light to everyone by establishing daylight cycles so that both sides of the planet have light. The government tries to stop them. Numerous factions get involved, and they each have their own take and their relationship to the terroir. That is, how the land is imparting its characteristics into each culture. I'm a sociologist and anthropologist by profession and education. And so I love studying culture and civilization and our relationship to the natural environment. Things like climate change take on a whole different magnitude when you're speaking about a planet that you're changing the rotation of. And so Severum is the main character. He finds himself drawn between the loyalties to the government who employs him and his inner values. And as he comes to witness the abuses of power, he must choose which side to fight on. And the weight of the world really relies on his balance and his sense of candor as he evaluates information from numerous perspectives that seem very polarized at first, creating a root of conflict. Before, I'd like to though introduce our next author here. David Balog is a new author with the RockHill Publishing Group who just published The Necromancer's Lament. And it's a fantasy book. He is an Ohio-based author, and he launched this book last month to great acclaim. He holds a master's degree in history, which reflects his love of studying the impacts of times long past, including the rich mythology of each civilization. So David's writing is informed by being a purveyor of folk tales, and now he has created a new mythology for a new age. David, can you tell us a little bit about The Necromancer's Lament?
Sure. You took care of all of my biography for me, so I don't have to introduce myself. I have Necromancer's Lament. It's a coming of age, dark high fantasy book. It's written as a memoir of the main character Mithron, who begins life as the son of a blacksmith and eventually is brought into the world of magic and wizardry. you know, as a necromancer, he's always hated the undead from his early childhood. And the wizard that gets his attention is somebody who's actually fighting the undead in the same way that he's always wanted to. So she teaches him a form of magic that destroys them rather than creates them. Necromancer's Lament it's his journey. It's him growing up, meeting other wizards, new friends, new rivalries, and finding enemies. And it's basically a chronicle of his adventures. Necromancer's Lament is the first in a trilogy. I'm in the middle of book 2 right now. And hopefully, my plan is to get that one, at least the first draft, done by the end of the year, so that we can start getting that rolled out. Yeah, it's a story of friendship and magic, and how to deal with tragedy and try to overcome it. Unfortunately, our next speaker, Barbara Harrison, isn't available today, but Athena will be speaking on her behalf. So I'd like to turn it over to Athena, please. Who is also muted.
You're still muted, Athena.
Sorry, I apologize.
Hey, that's fine.
Barbara cannot be with us as she is very far away in South Africa, but she wrote a very interesting book called Get Out Now. Now, this book deals with some serious subjects. It's about a young lady who falls in love all too quickly with a very attractive, intelligent, and artistic man. And well, the wedding day was the highlight of her life, and everything went downhill from then on. It's rather difficult to read at times, but it's a very important book to read because it gives hope. Because within tragedies and difficulties, often one finds that instead of looking for somebody to help you, the help is within yourself, and you will find how to get yourself out of trouble when you thought you couldn't, when you thought you were trapped, and all those kind of things. So that's the kind of book that Barbara wrote. She is not a depressed person. She is not a depressing writer, but she has known many people who have had such experiences, and she's the pen who managed to collect all those thoughts and ideas together and produce this work. Thank you, Barbara. It should be read. And next we go to James, who is going to present Myron Edwards, another one of our writers who is unfortunately not present because he's on the beautiful island of Cyprus, and there are just too many hours of in between our countries, and therefore he can't manage to be, with us.
Okay. Yes. So Myron was actually, after Athena, the first author that we picked up. And he's actually been published before. But like Athena said, he was on Cyprus, and Cyprus went through their financial troubles, and his publisher went belly up. And then he went looking for a new publisher. And he found us on LinkedIn. Now, most of my writers have found me, most of the people here have found me through various means of the internet search and just searching for a publisher here and there. Haley was the first person we actually met in person at the Miami Book Fair. So a couple of years back, Haley was passing through the Miami Book Fair, and she pitched her book to us, and we loved it. So
yeah, they decided to publish the girl with purple hair.
yeah.
figure.
Well, you were the mermaid, and I had just written a mermaid book, so there you go.
Perfect.
Synergy.
I
But
almost
Myron,
got I almost got picked up this way, James. You call my sister. You found my sister, and she spoke. So it was just like sort of once removed or something.
yeah. John's sister met us at the Barnes and Noble. We were doing book signings at Barnes and Noble, and she had no idea what your book was about, John. But she said it's very scientific, and and I should read it. I like science, and I should read it. So we meet people and authors in many different ways. And so I met Myron, like I said, through the internet. He contacted me, told me his story about how his company, who actually published Mistress of the Rock first, so there we go, and how that company then became insolvent, and he wanted to know if I would take a chance on it. So naturally, I told him to send me the submission information, and I read it, and it was a very interesting book because he mixed modern times with mythology, and the main character, he went through the Gulf War, and now I have two sons who also went into the Gulf War, and his main character, Cole, he goes to the Gulf War, but he doesn't really see any action. He's not into the fighting or anything. But on his way there, he stopped at Cyprus, the island of love, and the birthplace of Aphrodite. And he says a little prayer to Aphrodite to keep him safe. And so he goes off to the Gulf War. And even though he's not involved in the conflict, he's sent to watch this horrific battle. And it's not even a battle, it's actually a slaughter. The Iraqi army is fleeing back into Iraq, and they just get slaughtered on the way back. And so that gives Cole PTSD. And he goes back to Cyprus some years later, and then he starts seeing this image in the water that he's amazed that no one else has ever seen. And Myron had taken pictures of this, and he had this picture, and this is what made him write the story, and what made him come up with the story was there's an image in the water off of Cyprus where these rocks are, which is the birthplace of Aphrodite. It means from the foam or from the sea. So she is supposed to have coming out of this spot. And if you fly over the spot, you can see this image in the water. And so that was the impetus of him writing Mistress of the Rock. And then he followed that up with the second book, Scylla, the Revenge. And so Scylla then takes on the part, I'm not going to tell you what happened to Mistress of the Rock, but you just have to read it and find out. But Scylla is the second book in the trilogy, and it brings Cole back to Cyprus. All right, he goes back home after Mistress of the Rock, but things happen. Aphrodite awakens the monster, and you heard the old saying, between a rock and a hard place. Well, Scylla is the rock. So as you sail through these narrow Greek islands and stuff, it's like you go to one side and it's Scylla, the monster who was swiped the people off of the ships. And if you go the other way, it's like a typhoon tidal wave type of thing that sucks the ship in. So the two sisters, the two cryptides are in that water. And so that's what brought us to Scylla. And then the third book is coming out, which is Julie's Revenge. But we're still working on the title because I heard him call it 3 different things already. As usually it goes when you're writing a book. You start off with one title, and sometimes you wind up having several different ideas. And by the time you finish the book and we put it out and everything, it might have a completely different title. But it's going to be a very, very interesting book. And I'm in contact with Myron quite often. Like we said, it's a big time difference between here and Cyprus, but I talk to Myron quite a bit, and he wishes he could be here, but it's like 2-3 o'clock in the morning in Cyprus now. So I told him, don't worry about it. We will make sure that the world knows Myron Edwards. And that's my spiel on Myron. Now, there were some questions, and Sandy, help me out. What were the questions?
Someone asked, so Dante asked, what are the number of words in a book that you need?
Books should usually run around 80,000 words. Pretty much anything from 50,000 on up, and should end around 100,000. Once you get above 100,000, it becomes very expensive to produce, and it's really hard that most publishers won't take a new writer with like 150,000 words because it's just too costly to produce a book like that. And so the real sweet spot for most stories is about 80,000. That makes a good sci-fi. It'll make for a good fantasy, romance. It gives you enough meat on the bones to really tell a nice story.
So James, this is the beginning. Today was the very first day of the Miami Book Fair. And this was our kickoff. This was the kickoff for RockHill Publishing to have a Facebook Live to introduce all of your authors all of them were published this year. So you had 5 authors published this year, all first-time authors. So what are the plans? Why don't you talk about the plans for the rest of the week and the Miami Book Fair? And if you want to have some of the authors talk about what they're going to be doing throughout the week. We have another like half hour to go.
Yeah. Okay, I will go to maybe save that for a little later because, like I said, me and Athena are also authors, and we have books that we would like to.
Well, that is true. So why don't you? Okay, you and Athena talk about your books. That's a great idea.
So I'm going to let Athena talk about her books first, and then I'm going to come back and talk about my books, and then we could talk about whatever comes up. We'll go from there. So Athena. Let me mute myself.
Okay, there we go.
There you go.
I figured it out. It's like that. Eventually, it's an evolution. Okay, so I am also a writer, and I have written 4 books. Okay, I'm not going to pick them all up. They're here. Okay, so I write romance mostly. But when I say romance, this is an interesting thing because the modern day romance is obviously not the same type of romance that was mentioned in the olden days. Zach's story is a romance because it includes all the correct subjects that were needed for a classic romance. That was an actual romance. There are heroes, there are things to overcome, family, interchanging, becoming something different. That was the true romance of the classics. But nowadays, I write stories about hardships, obsessions, love, and the ability of a flawed person to become something greater. So even when everything is falling apart, they must struggle and, plow through all these things to find a better way and learn to compromise, because that's usually the thing. 2 very different people meet and now both have different expectations. Now, how do you make things work between people? Somebody must say yes and somebody must say no. And when do you say yes and when do you say no? So you compromise and come to an understanding and agreement. So you will notice if you read my work, I don't concentrate too much on landscapes and describing surroundings too much. I will give a little paragraph about something. I prefer the internal landscape, so to speak. And though I use fairly strong men and women, they always have to humble themselves in everything they do, because it's not about what they want. And that talking, understanding, sharing, and compromise is always for the greater good, and not for me or you, but for us. And that is why I write romance. Thank you.
Okay. as you can see, me and Athena are in the same place. And because if you notice our background, we both have the same background. So the reason why you hear the feedback is because we're both working off of our own computers or cell phones or whatever. And therefore, without muting and pulling plugs and things like that, we get horrible feedback. Okay, so as a writer, and I've been writing for several decades, actually. I started when I was very young, and I worked on a couple of books way back when. And my first book that I actually wrote was a sci-fi, which is called Pegasus, A Journey to New Eden. Now, I consider myself a sci-fi writer at first, and I used to write a lot of sci-fi short stories and things like that because I love science fiction, and I love the different sciences, physical science and computer science and all the different disciplines. So I wrote a lot of science fiction, and Pegasus was my first real attempt at writing a novel. And it takes place in the near future. The world is a dystopian. And at the time when I wrote it, I didn't even know what a dystopian was. I didn't know it was a character, a genre. But it takes place in the near future now. When I wrote it, it would have been a little bit more of a distant future story. And it's about the world creating a Noah's Ark, so to speak. And then the world falls into this pattern, and we see the patterns over and over again in history. And so these patterns repeat themselves of civilization building and then self-destructing. So we come to this point in time when the world has again built to this fantastic level of technology. And it's that very technology that seems to doom mankind. And so we wind up with Pegasus, which is the first real starship. And they're on their way, they're going to take humanity to a brand new planet. And because they're raping the earth of all her goods and all her resources, it caused an all-out nuclear war. And so two people are trapped upon.
Are you sure I didn't write this book, James? Based on our conversation, I'm telling you, I have been on the catch-22 Fermi paradox for about the past 20 years of my life, and I'm kicking myself. You and I didn't meet each other 20 years ago.
Well, if we would have met each other 20 years ago, we would probably have been great friends, but I don't know if I would have been the publisher at that time. I was busy trying to get myself published. So that's the way my science fiction, and actually that's a common thread through most of my work. There's a bit of a dark slant in my work because I see both the bright future and I see the dangers that is inherent in all things. Actually, it doesn't matter whether you're talking science, whether you're talking nature, whether you're talking personalities or people. There's a darkness and there's an evil side as there is a good side to everything. I'm also a purist, so I don't mix my science fiction and my fantasies and things like that. So this is the first of 3 books. It's called The Emerald Lady. It's a fantasy, and it's about the golden age of pirates, and it's a mermaid pirate love story. It's not a romance, as we heard from Athena, the differences between romances, but there's a very big difference also between romance and love stories. Romances of the day, modern romances, are happily ever afters. Back in the day, romances used to be, like she said, full of turmoil. Now we call those type of stories love stories. So when you have a love story, it may not end happily ever after. There may be deaths involved and things like that, and the pair might have to go through quite a bit of hardship. So in the Emerald Lady, Shira, who is a mermaid, she rescued Jeremy from a shipwreck, His ship is caught in a hurricane, and she rescues him and takes him to a sunken ship, puts him in the air pocket in the sunken ship, and then goes ask the Queen of the Mermaids to retrieve him, to help her retrieve him and bring him back to land. Well, the Queen of the Mermaids is her mother, and she absolutely forbids it. She says he should die at sea. That was his fate, and she should let him die. But Shira fell in love with him instantly. Now, as we all know, men fall in love with mermaids at first sight. It's not always that way with mermaids, but Shira did. And so she tried to rescue Jeremy, and she causes a tragedy. And because of the tragedy she caused, which is the so-called reason behind her mother cursing her and Jeremy. And the curse is so outrageous that it causes a split in the mermaid's world. Now, this is a historical fantasy because it takes place in the age of piracy, but it also takes place during the American Revolution. And we learn how mermaids have been influencing history throughout history. So it's a bit of a new twist on an old mythology. I kind of like to take things and twist them around and that kind of thing. So it's the first of 3 books. The second book I wrote was the Ruby Cradle. And now for NaNoWriMo mode, I'm working on the 3rd book, which is called The Diamond Warrior. So it's called the Gemstone series, and you should be getting the next installment sometime this year or early next year. Now, I also write adult fiction, and this is Killer with a Heart, Killer with 3 Heads. It's my crime series about mobs and gangs in New York. And it's not a true story. Let me put it that way. I grew up in New York. I grew up among gangs and mobsters and things like that. So I heard a story or two from a person here and there. And so these stories that I hear and that I know and people that I know have made their way into my psychic. And therefore, when I started to write, I had to tell the story. And the one thing that you always hear about when you hear about these mobsters or gangsters or stuff, you always hear that people say, oh, he was such a nice guy. I never knew he was the head of the mafia. Or, I never knew this guy was, this big criminal. And that's because people don't just become criminals overnight. Like anything else, it takes time and practice. And the real good ones spend a lot of time and a lot of practice. So the Killer series starts off with Nikki Nails, and Mojo Johnson, Morris Johnson, as teenagers. And as they grow into this life of crime, you'll see they go through many different things, and they are ruthless people, as most criminals would be. And so it's a 4-part series. I wrote all 4 books, and I am in the process of editing, rewriting to get the next 2 books out. So hopefully sometime next year, you'll have the full Killer series done. And that's one that's really close to my heart. Like I said, because I know a lot of people who live that life. And it's sort of like my homage to being a New Yorker. So that's me in a nutshell. Now, Sandy, you was asking me something about what were we going to do next?
Well, I
was asking you what we're going to do next. Sorry, I didn't realize I wasn't looking at the agenda, and I'm like, whoops, I left you and Athena totally off. But we do have someone that's watching Facebook Live, Dante, who's asking several questions. I don't know if you can see them or if you want us to ask.
If you could read them, that'll be great, because I can't really see what's coming up.
Well, James, a lot of them are about submissions. So are you currently accepting submissions? And if you are, what is the word count that you want, and how would someone go about getting their submission to you? What exactly are you looking for?
Okay, right now our submissions are closed. We're going to open it up again next year, sometimes in the near future. I would say probably around the spring. But the way to do it will be to go to our website. We'll have a submission page there. You click on the submission page, and the guidelines are usually always the same. We ask for character synopsis, we ask for a story synopsis, we ask for the first 2 chapters, one chapter in the middle, and the end chapter. And let me explain why. We want to see how the book starts off. That's always important, to see how the story goes, see what the flow of the story is. We ask for a chapter in the middle to see if you keep up the intensity of the story. It also gives you a chance to show us your best work. Usually your best work is not the beginning of the book. It might be the best sentence, might be the first sentence of your book, but your best work usually comes somewhere in the middle as you develop this story, as you develop your characters. So that gives you a chance to show us what your best work is like. And then as publishers, we have to know how the story ends, because we have to know whether or not this is going to end happily, it's going to end tragically, what type of story it's going to be in the long run. And those 4 chapters will tell us quite a bit. And then if we read it, and like Athena was saying earlier, if it strikes us and we see the potential that it will be a good book, a good story, you told a very good story, then we will ask for the full manuscript. We read that, we go over it. And one thing we do is we always send back a report, a detailed report on what you did right, what you did wrong, if you need to fix it before resubmitting, what things should be done to fix the story, to tighten up the story. Like if you have plot holes, because some people don't realize that they have a plot hole. They'll write something, they'll write a part of a story, and then they'll go on to something else, but they never really told us what happened in the other part of the story. And readers will like to know what happened to the character on page 58 that came in, had some important thing to say, and never reappears again in the story. So we talk about that to the writers. You know, you have to fix those things. People want to know. People need all the endings, all the string tied up in nice little neat bows. You can have a cliffhanger at the end of your story if it's going into another story, but you should still end that story. And so that's one of the things too. And when we're ready to reopen, I would just say, keep checking the website. You'll notice when the submissions are open and ready to go. And we'll make an announcement too. So it'll be out there on Facebook. It'll say, you know, RockHill Publishing now accepting submissions.
Amy, can you see the rest of the questions from Dante? I seem to have lost them. Or Haley, I know Haley was watching and responding to him. So if one of you will give James the questions that Dante's asking.
Yeah, a lot of them were about the submission and the word count. And then there was one about short stories. So let me get that one, and then I can ask that one. But if anyone else has one on here that you guys want to like give feedback, that's always interesting too.
Yeah, so if anybody else has anything, I just like to say that we have met a lot of people in a lot of different ways. Like Zach, I think his agent recommended us to him. Mark, I think he had some kind of magic number that he was going to submit to, and we hit the magic number before he decided just to go off and do it on his own. So it's a myriad of ways of which people get published. And what I try to do as a publisher, and the reason why I started RockHill Publishing, was because I knew how hard it is for people and how soul crushing it is to get rejection notices. And at one point, I took that as the badge of courage. Oh, this person didn't like my thing. Wait until I publish it and it's a big hit. They'll be sorry. But it is a soul crushing business. And one of the things we like to do when we talk to new artists, and the reason why I do specialize in new writers, is to bring them into the reality of what the publishing world is like. Like I said, I've been at this for a long time. I've been running this publishing company for about 7-8 years now, but I was writing and trying to get published for a good 30 years before that, before I decided to even start my own publishing company. So you have to have a realization and and know that it's not going to work out the way you think it is. And everybody always jumps to the idea of Stephen King and, Rollins and this one and that one, but they never really see what those people went through before they became the names that they are today. They went through years of not being published, being rejected, all this kind of things. So it's never like you think it is. There is no such thing as an overnight success. Overnight success comes from years of hard work.
An overnight success often leads to a morning of failure.
Or heavy drinking.
Yeah.
Or an unwanted pregnancy test.
Well, I do want to make sure that, Athena, what your comment that you just made is a great comment, that they're always available to go over your work and help you with it. And even if they're not taking any new submissions, that's a very generous offer. So, so do you want to talk about that, Athena?
Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the comment was actually directed at our writers, that whatever they want to discuss, if they need a little help with their plots, if they stumble into something and they want some feedback or something, I mean, I don't have to see the complete work all the time. If you're struggling with something, by all means, ask me questions, tell me you're having a problem. Do you want to make this thing fit with this thing? But how do you create the bridge? What bridge must you bring? Must it be steel? Must it be wool? Must it be rope? What are you going to use to make these things fit together? So back and forth, that's, now that you are our writers, I am your editor, your helper. If you need my help, by all means, come forward and I will help you the way I can. It might not work for you, but what I say might trigger something else that brings you to a different realization and fix your work in a different way. So please, whenever you need something, just, send it to us and say what it is for. It's not a submission. You're just asking. You want me to act as a beta reader for you as well. I'll do that as well. And I'll point out things if I see them, because you fixing things at the beginning is going to help the editing process. You're going to make it so much better later on. So let's fix it along the way instead of sending it to me and then we discover the holes. So rather do that.
That's awesome. That's a very generous offer and so those of you that are watching out on Facebook Live tonight, or watching on YouTube later, or watching in the marketplace of the Miami Book Fair, that just gives you a picture of what RockHill Publishing is like for their authors. And I can tell you, you don't always find that. And especially when you're with Random House or someone that has hundreds and hundreds or maybe even thousands of authors, to get their specific help on one of your books was probably just does not happen. So Athena, thank you for saying that and for showing us the heart of RockHill Publishing, which is James and Athena. So
on a note, I want to say my agent did actually recommend James, and when I got a contract from James, I also had another offer from a larger publishing house, and I was advised by my agent to go with James because I'd get a lot more hands-on attention. And actually, writing the book was the easy bit. I sat by a beach, wrote it, and surfed and wrote and surfed. It was really easy. The editing was a lot harder, because it's not that much had to change, and I wasn't even that emotional about it. Okay, cut it out, fine, get rid of this bit, get rid of it, I don't care. It's actually, you have to take a step back and be objective, and it's very hard to be objective when you've been so subjective about something to begin with. And so that's been I wrote a book before. I've actually written 2 books, but when I met James, but now I know how to write a book.
And wasn't it a lot more difficult the second time around now, since you know what you did the first time around? Do you find that it's even more difficult now?
Well, what do they say? Inspirations for amateurs and schedulings for professionals. So in other words, it's like, when you're writing it the first time, it's exciting, it's new, and I didn't think it was going to be published, really. I just wrote it because, my dad had died, and I said I was going to write the book. I thought, well, enough talk, I'll write it. I didn't think I was actually going to get it published. I didn't think I could really write. And then the second time round, though, now is you see the differences. What I've noticed is reading this book, I got published, but reading that is, I found that I look at it and I go, oh my God, that's terrible. Oh, I should have done this. Oh, I should have done that. So I think I've become more professional. So I get paid for it. I get paid for this.
I can definitely sympathize with that, Zach, where I had to discipline myself not to rewrite the whole story every time Athena sent me back for like, I need a different sentence here, and I'd actually write the whole chapter. This is terrible.
You're much more polite, John. I didn't say it like that way. I was like, why is she telling me to write this for?
Zach, going on to your earlier statement about meeting James and Athena, we all went through long periods looking for a publisher in one fashion or another. But the fact that these two have been so hands-on with everything, that we have weekly meetings, and I've gotten to know all of you, whereas in a larger company, I probably never even know who my fellow authors are. But to spend so much time in discussing the business, discussing books, it's been a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I couldn't have found a better company. Thank you.
Well, as soon as the pandemic's over, we'll all get together somewhere around,
Yes,
Miami.
next year we're going to
Miami.
actually meet in Miami, and I'll be able to tour guide you because I live here.
We're all going to sleep on her living room floor. Thank you.
Hey,
Isn't there a Los Angeles?
Everybody has to
I'll
be
be
with
one of
the
those.
cat. But
I've done that before. I've been there.
Well, James,
no, like these guys are amazing. Little me in grad school, purple hair, like, hey, I'm a scientist, here's a fantasy novel. And they've done amazing work, and I love everyone here so much. They really are family.
Haley,
I'd
if you
just
hadn't
like to
written that
say
book,
that,
you would have been insane college student if you hadn't written that book.
I was already an insane college student. I went to grad school.
and I would like to say that I have met quite a few interesting and very smart people. Every single one of you, and it shows in your writing. Every single one of you show that you are very talented, very smart, probably smarter than me, and an inspiration to me. And like I said, I've been writing for a long time. And I get a very big thrill and joy out of seeing the joy that you get when your books are finally published. And I still get that same thrill and joy when my books are published. So it's like, I know where you're at. I feel that energy, and I feel that excitement that you feel. And it's the whole reason why I'm doing this, really. It is the whole reason why RockHill exists. Because I could just publish my own self and be quite happy, but I would not be fulfilled. And bringing you and Zach and John and Mark and everybody else and a few more people down the road who we're working on now, bringing y'all out into this world and putting your books out there. And it's just gives me great joy and great pleasure.
And
I thank you all.
Yes, to that being exactly, because when I met James and Athena on the cruise last year in January, that is what he talked about the whole time, was the authors that he was working with. And so we met almost every day talking about the different stories. So it was great, James. This is a great way to kick off the Miami Book Fair. And RockHill Publishing is in the marketplace. So all of you have your link, go there, visit. I have to say that James, I had a difficulty getting there a few times today, and because it said it took too long. So I'm hoping that means that there's 300,000 plus people, all of them trying to get into the RockHill booth.
I hope so too.
They're online. So
well, we set up the table like we would have it at the booth.
Very good, very good. So we'll see you tomorrow night. We'll be back. The RockHill Publishing gang will be back here tomorrow night, 7 o'clock Eastern. Same link. We'll be publishing it everywhere. Dante, I hope you come back and join us again tomorrow. It was great to have your questions, and we have some other comments coming in now, so go look at them. Julie just made a comment. I saw that CJ made a comment earlier, so some of our regulars in the Through the Eyes of Authors group. So we'll see you tomorrow night, same time. It's a 30-minute call tomorrow night though, so we'll see you then.
And tomorrow night we'll be talking science fiction.
Okay, good. So we'll have our science fiction authors on, and that will be John, Mark, who else?
And me. And yours truly.
Very good, James. Good. Okay, so we'll see the three of you guys tomorrow night. And in the meantime, if you have any questions or any comments, please leave them here in the live publishing event. That live event page will be up for the entire week. So leave your comments there. We'll make sure we get them answered for you. And we'll see you tomorrow night. Have fun at the Miami Book Fair.
Bye, everybody. See you tomorrow.